First Samuel chapter 4. Between chapter 3 and 4, we have a time skip. We go from when Samuel was being called as a child, and then we jump forward several years later, and Israel is at war against the Philistines, and they go through devastating defeat. But instead of repenting and seeking God, they treat the ark like a good luck charm, thinking they can force God to give them victory. And then what follows is one of the darkest moments in Israel's history. So not only is their death count even higher than the previous battle, the ark is now lost. So for the first time ever, the Ark of Yahweh is captured and lost into enemy hands. And so the nation is in deep, deep shock and horror. And this terrifying declaration, the glory has departed, because the ark signifies Yahweh's presence. So we see in this chapter a picture of what happens when people only want God's power, but not God himself. And so we see the following story start to unravel. And this chapter is wonderful because we're actually able to see a lot of historical background, take a look at archaeological evidence that is connected to both the Philistines, the Israelites, but also, more importantly, a deeper spiritual warning and meaning behind this chapter. A warning that is still extremely relevant to our modern church and Christianity today, about how sometimes we only want God's blessings, only want his power, but we don't actually want God himself. And so this is a great chapter to deep dive and pay attention to. So let's begin 1 Samuel chapter 4. Now, present times, there's another time skip. Now, Israel went out to battle against the Philistines. The Philistines are in the Bible, and they will continually appear for many books. These are called the Sea Peoples. If you ever go to the Smithsonian or the World Museum, it's because they came by sea. So from the Aegean Sea, Mediterranean Sea, so they come on from the coastal region of Israel. So the Philistine cities are going to be right on the west side of Israel. So it's all on the coast. They came by boat, which is why the ancient civilization, not just Israel, you'll see their names recorded in Egyptian texts, Hittite texts, other Canaanite texts. In the Bible, we are familiar with them because like Goliath is a Philistine. So we just say Philistines. But modern archaeology has found that it's 9 different tribes. They're not all the same. They're not all just a uniform one group. They're actually different tribes that independently came from the sea. But because they all came from the sea, the people of the land just call them all sea people. But they're actually their own people, maybe some shared language, but they actually have distinct language. That's how modern archaeology found that they're actually distinct tribes. So if you ever go to museums, they probably won't use Philistines anymore unless you're in a Bible museum, because Philistines, it's too vague and it's actually not accurate. Back in the day, they didn't group them to say that they're the same. They just say they're a category of sea peoples that came from the coast. So they didn't assume that they were all the same. But because of our disconnect as Americans when we read the Bible, or as modern people when we read the Bible, we think Philistines is just one uniform group, but they're not. So then it helps explain a lot later on why they are never one country fighting. They have 5 different main cities and they have their own kings. Now that makes sense. So the Philistines were on the west side coastal region. They came from the western side. So some places will call them Greek, but once again, they're not uniformly Greek. But they also have better equipment. So the Levant, so the Canaanite Israel region, they were still in late Bronze Age. So they were still using bronze technology. And the Sea Peoples, and this is why they're so famous in history, because the Sea Peoples coming from Aegean Sea and Mediterranean, they brought iron. And that's why they won. That's why they were so powerful. They brought in iron weapons. So they came by boat, brought in their iron technology, and then totally annihilated Egypt through Israel, which we call the Levant, up north to the Ugarit Hittite area. So they came in and essentially forced this whole area to go from Bronze Age, late Bronze Age, into the Iron Age. So that's another reason why the Sea Peoples are very, very commonly, if you go to a lot of ancient Near East civilization showings and exhibitions, they're very key because they essentially pushed civilization from bronze into Iron Age. So at first they were winning. They went to go fight Egypt and you're like, they could never take down Egypt. They beat Egypt multiple times. But everybody in mainland, everybody was slower. Sea people came in and were winning everywhere. And so you actually... Because of the iron. So their iron weaponry, like their spears, their ironwork, their chariots, all that stuff. And so they came in and then they were winning a lot at first. So that's why there's so many records of them, because so many of these records of all these different civilizations in the mainland area was like scared. They were like, we can't win. They just keep winning. They keep winning everywhere. our neighboring big brother Egypt is also getting beat. So these are the Philistines. So they come in and they are the first in Canaan to process iron. They're a stronger enemy than the Moabites and the Ammonites. So if you read earlier in Genesis or Leviticus or even in Joshua, we talk more about the Moabites and the Ammonites and the Edomites. So they're all the people that always just kind of are living close by. Nobody goes on boat. Nobody is battling via boat. It's just land to land. So now when these people are coming in with boat, they're fighting you, and when they run off into the ocean, you can't chase them. And they can come at you at any point in time, or they can stay in their boats and they can just fire at you and attack you, and you have no way to access them on the ocean. So their naval is more advanced, and then their weapons and their iron is more advanced than your bronze. Bronze is softer. And so this is where we see they're starting to interact with the Israelites, and you really see that the Philistines are in a superior position. Now Israel went out to battle against the Philistines. So it continues. They encamped at Ebenezer, and the Philistines encamped at Aphek. So they is the Israelites. So the Israelites are encamping at Ebenezer, and the Philistines are encamping at Aphek. So they're close to each other, but they aren't at it yet. They're a standoff right now. Verse 2, the Philistines drew up in line against Israel, and when the battle spread, Israel was defeated before the Philistines. So then when they are getting ready to battle, like we see in Braveheart or whatever, they stand in a line, the Philistines are up in a line, and then the Israelites are in a line, and then they go. And the idea is the Philistines completely won. Israel was defeated before the Philistines, who killed about 4,000 men on the field of battle. So the Philistines killed 4,000 Israelites. Verse 3, and when the people came to camp, the elders of Israel said, why has the Lord defeated us today before the Philistines? And so the elders, the leaders of Israel is like, how is this possible? Why are we being beat by these foreigners? Isn't our God better? Isn't our God real? Isn't our God bigger, the one and only God? So we now see they just went into battle. Really, they're supposed to ask God, should I go into battle? They never asked. And so, yeah, God's like, you went into battle on your own. I'm not going to help you on this. Why do you assume that you're going to win? Why do you assume that if you decide on your own to go to battle, that I'm just a little puppy as your God and then I have to help you? No, you don't get to decide these things. So then the elders, the next line here, it does not say, let's go ask if we should have even been in battle. Let's repent because we didn't ask God before. It actually says, let us bring the ark of the covenant of the Lord here from Shiloh, that it may come among us and save us from the power of our enemies. So they're like, I'm not going to actually ask God for it. I'm going to force God into it, because back then the ark of the covenant was God's presence. I would have thought, okay, maybe you would confess and repent and be like, oh shoot, I skipped a step here. I just went into battle. I should have asked. I'm so sorry. Let me go ask God what I should do next.
So the Israelites are the one that started it?
We don't know. It could be the Philistines came and challenged. Even then, the Israelites should ask God. That's what the leaders should have done. You should have asked before just going into battle. But they probably thought, we have a more powerful God. So yeah, I'll take it. But God's like, just because I am the one and only true God.
No,
yeah.
That's not how this works.
Yes, exactly. You don't get to decide. Yeah. But as you can see, instead of saying, you know what, let's go back and ask and double check with God. Let's seek God for counsel. They're like, no. There's no asking here. It's just, let's forcibly go into the tabernacle, take the Ark of Covenant, forcing God to come with us without asking. Even if he doesn't want to, he doesn't get a choice, because we can physically force it out. And so he goes, let us bring it, that it may come. So it's not he may come, that the Ark may come among us and save us. So they're not actually saying that God can be among us. They think that this Ark is some voodoo magic miracle. Like, this is a good luck charm. This is my superstition. If we bring it, it will bring us war victory. And so it doesn't actually say that God may come among us. It literally says that the Ark can come among us. And then even worse, that it may save us. The Ark will save us. Not Yahweh, not God, the Ark. So they considered the Ark as a charm. They're essentially forcing God's hand to do their own will. They don't consult God. They don't care about God's will. They're unaware of their sin, which probably led them to this situation in the first place. A chapter ago, it already said this whole nation was falling completely defunct between their relationship with God. So you were already in sin. You were not in good standing. You have no self-awareness. And now, instead of trying to right your relationship with God, you're like, double down, worsen it. I'm going to force it, right? It's like, oh my gosh. So from the map, we can see that the place where they're battling is a legit multi-day walk from Shiloh So them deciding this, going to Shiloh, taking the ark, and then coming back to the battleground, 100% intentional. It wasn't just an emotional, reactive situation. Didn't think, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. Nope. Verse 4, so the people sent to Shiloh and brought from there the ark of the covenant of the Lord of hosts, who is enthroned on the cherubim. The irony is that the writer, and we assume here at this point is probably still Samuel writing, that the Lord of the heavenly armies, he uses that term, the Lord, the commander of the heavenly armies, who is enthroned. He is enthroned. He is sitting on the throne of heaven, but the way that the ark is made, like over here is a picture, there's two cherubims, which are a certain type of angels that are described in the Bible, and the idea is God sits above these two angels, so he's sitting here in a throne. Obviously, the understanding for the Israelites is that he's actually sitting in a heavenly throne, but here it's just a image picture, so that people can understand that God sits on a throne physically here when he's with us. So the people walked 40 miles to go grab the ark from Shiloh, this ark that is supposedly the throne of God. So the contrast and the irony. You forcibly are bringing God's throne, as though you are bigger and stronger and you can command Yahweh. And then in the same sentence says Yahweh, who is the God of the heavenly armies, who is God of the universe, who is enthroned above the arrogance of man, of humans, but also the complete unawareness of the spiritual reality of humans. And we see that in one sentence. They go forcibly take God's throne, thinking, I'm going to force God to be in battle and to give us victory. And the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were there with the Ark of the Covenant of God. People usually can't go into the most holy place. So how are they able to even get the Ark out? You have to have access to a priest. Normal people can't just go in and grab it. It was like inside job. Somebody on the inside had to agree with you and help you take that thing out. They have very specific ways of the poles, inserting the poles and how to lift it up, who gets to lift it, who can't lift it, and it's supposed to be the Levites who lift it. So there was definitely an inside job situation happening. And here, by name, it says, the two sons of the high priest, Hophni and Phinehas, they probably orchestrated and helped with the whole thing. So as the elders and the political leaders wanted to just go fight, they were like, yeah, we'll go with you. They didn't say, you know what, this is a little too much. Let's inquire God. Because they don't care about God. They literally have no respect for God. So they're like, yeah, let's do it, whatever. We're going to win. We'll just take this lucky charm. So we now see Hophni and Phinehas were not only helping them get the ark out of the temple, they were with them on the battlefield. So now we know the ark plus the sons are now taking it out of Shiloh, going back to the battlefield. Verse 5, as soon as the ark of the covenant of the Lord came into the camp, all Israel gave a mighty shout so that the earth resounded. So the Israelites, the soldiers, they see the ark and they're cheering. They're like, yeah. And here's the irony. Are they cheering because Yahweh's there, or are they cheering because their lucky charm is there? And I'm very convinced, leaning towards the latter, because I don't think in this moment they think of Yahweh and his will and him as God. They just think of him as like a genie, like a charm. Verse 6, and when the Philistines heard the noise of the shouting, they said, what does this great shouting in the camp of the Hebrews mean? And when they learned that the ark of the Lord, the Hebrew God, had come to camp, verse 7, the Philistines were afraid, for they said, a God has come into the camp. And now we get it, right? Because the Philistines are polytheistic. They have their leader god. Their leader god is Dagon, which is half man, half fish, which makes sense because they're so related to the ocean. They think our God is Dagon and your God is Yahweh. So your nation's God is now coming in to fight for you. They're scared though, right? So the Philistines said, woe to us, for nothing like this has happened before. Verse 8, woe to us. Who can deliver us from the power of these mighty gods? These are the gods who struck the Egyptians with every sort of plague in the wilderness. So these Philistines that are not Egyptians, hundreds of years ago, the Exodus, they've heard of the 10 plagues in Egypt, and they are aware Yahweh's name is famous among the lands, even though their local culture is still polytheistic. They have multiple gods and they worship all gods. They are aware that the Hebrews have this one God that is super powerful, and his name, literally God's name, Yahweh's name, has spread amongst even the foreign lands of his power. And this is several hundreds of years ago about this plague, the 10 plagues in Moses' time, and they're talking about it. And the irony is that the Philistines seem to fear Yahweh more than the Israelites themselves. If you think about it, the Israelites are cheering because of the ark. The Philistines are like, hang on, this ark represents a God, and that God is that same God that freed them from Egypt with 10 plagues. The Israelites are like, yay, our lucky charm is here. The Philistines are like, oh my goodness, there is power.
It's almost like they understood the implications of what they were doing more than
the Israelites themselves.
Right.
And that's so sad, you know,
So crazy.
and that the fact that the nation that should have been the believers have reduced God down to nothing but just a superstition and like rubbing a crystal, versus those that are pagan and the Gentiles that don't even believe in your God. They have more respect for your God than you do yourself. You've defiled the tabernacle, defiled his worship services. You've even defiled the ark now. And yet a foreign nation, a pagan nation that is more evil and more wicked in the Israelites' eyes, because the Israelites think they're more pure and holy, and they look down on all the Gentiles like they're dirty and very sinful and ceremonially impure. These people, they actually understand that behind the ark is Yahweh and Yahweh's power, not the ark. The power is not in the ark. And so I think that's just such a sad situation that they actually had a better view of the presence of Yahweh, presence of God, than the Israelites themselves. Sometimes that happens with us, like the Christians that we are living, like non-Christians are more aware of our God, our Jesus Christ, what it should look like to live in the promise, what it should look like to have Jesus' peace or to be forgiving or to give grace. And then us as Christians, we don't understand it, we don't do it, we're so blinded. Like sometimes the Christian nation, the Christendom, or like the Israelite nation, we are so jaded sometimes, we take it for granted. We talked about cheapening God's blood sometimes. And then a non-believer is more aware what a Christian should look like than we realize. And then so we're just being ridiculous. And then the non-Christian is like, isn't your Jesus supposed to be like loving to the poor and giving justice to the marginalized and the oppressed? And then the Christians are the ones that are oppressing and are stealing from the poor. It's irony, but it's reality that keeps repeating itself.
Well, I think it goes back to power and using religion and power
To
manipulate.
Yeah. And then the people outside of it can see it so clearly, yet the people inside of it are unaware and almost self-deceiving. They might notice it, but they would rather be part of it because then they're part of the power. So they'd rather just continue to play into it. And so I guess nothing new under the sun is literally also happened. Verse 9, take courage and be men, O Philistines. So the Philistines are like pep talking themselves because they're actually more fearful of God than the Israelites are. So they're fearful. They're like, okay, take courage, guys. Take courage, lest you become slaves to the Hebrews as they have been to you. Because Philistines have been winning. So when you win, you take the losing side as your captives and turn them into slaves. So he's like, okay, take heart, take courage, you guys. Like, be men so that you don't want to be a slave for the Hebrews like we've been taking them as our slaves. Be men and fight. Verse 10, so the Philistines fought, and Israel was defeated. So they brought the ark thinking the ark is going to save them, but no. Israel was defeated, and they fled. The Israelites fled, every man to his home. And there was a very great slaughter, for 30,000 foot soldiers of Israel fell. Before they took the ark, it was 4,000. They thought, I'm going to get the ark, and we're going to turn this around, and it's going to be a win for us. Nope. Now you have 30,000. That is literally 8 times, 8x the amount of death, the amount of loss. Had you just not touched the ark, don't go. Why? Verse 11, and the ark of God was captured, and the 2 sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, died. Detrimental things. The sons were going to be killed anyway because God had said they're evil. Okay, the ark is now captured. They lost the ark of God. Oh my gosh. Like, oh my gosh. Like the centerpiece for your tabernacle, the centerpiece for your temple has now been kidnapped, been taken by the other country. Oh my gosh, you made it all worse. Had you not brought out the ark, you probably wouldn't have lost as many men, and you definitely wouldn't have lost the ark because the ark would have been safely miles away. So this is terrible. Apparently in the 70s, there was an excavation that found a Philistine account of this exact battle. And it actually talks about that they battled once, and then the Israelites left, grabbed an ark, grabbed their thing, and then came back and returned to battle a second time. And it actually mentions Hophni, the priest's son, by name. When we study Old Testament carefully and remember the details, you'll see it pop up in a lot of excavation archaeology because these are real events. So these aren't just fake stories. These are real events that happen in this order, in the way that it say it does. And that's just another way of when people are like, how do we know it's true? The historical events are true because we're finding more evidence for all these stories all day long. Now, what we debate is never, did these events happen? We believe that these events happen because there's evidence. What we debate is the spiritual debate. Do we believe that there is a God, a one and only Yahweh that's behind all this, that's worth our time? Maybe, maybe not. I think that's where we should debate, as opposed to, did all these things happen? Because we have historical evidence outside of the Bible that corroborate that these events happen, that these battles happen. Now, really, the debate shouldn't be, was the Bible just made up? Because the historical events are reliable. What we should really direct our focus is, do we believe the spiritual side is what it says it is? The divine power or the supernatural force that it talks about, is that real? Now, that's a whole different conversation. That's a spiritual conversation, which I think is much more worth of our time versus arguing about whether or not the Bible is real. Because if we want to argue, that's pretty easy. We just be educated. Get educated. Don't be ignorant. But really, you go and you see in the museums, non-Christians have found these excavations. So historians and archaeologists will say, yeah, these events happen. They just, if they're not Christian, they'll be like, I just don't believe that. I don't believe that Dagon was a god either. I don't believe in the idol gods either. I don't think that Baal was a real god that had power. They think it's just human against human. Like Israelites were just another human group. So just nation against nation is just normal nation battles. The question, really, we should elevate it to what the spiritual implications are, not the physical stuff. Because the physical stuff, we have tons and tons of evidence that these events happened. But the importance of it in eternity is really the conversation. So a lot of times as Christians, we get caught up in these conversations about, is scripture real? As Christians, I think it's important that we educate ourselves. And it's like, actually, I don't really want to waste time on if it's real, because there's actually archaeology. You could see it at the Louvre. These items are stored in the British Museum. These items are stored in the Smithsonian in DC. And these items are stored here and here and here. And so there are actually evidence that shows these people existed, these kings existed, these nations existed, these battles actually happened. So let's not waste time talking about historical records because we have evidence. Let's spend time talking about the supernatural part, the divine part. Let's talk about that. Like, because you can be an atheist and still believe all the historical stuff happened, right? Verse 12, a man of Benjamin, so that same day, a man of the Benjamin tribe, so his name was not Benjamin, it was from the Benjamin tribe, ran from the battle line and came back to Shiloh that same day with his clothes torn and with dirt on his head. So this is a sign of extreme mourning, extreme distress and sorrow and horror. And when he arrived, Eli was sitting on his seat by the road watching, for his heart trembled for the ark of God. So Eli knew that the ark was forcibly taken out. We don't know if Eli agreed to it. Sounds like he probably knew this wasn't a great idea. The fact that he was sitting outside and watching the street, being very fearful, trembling, worried about the ark of God. I think he's worried, like, is it going to make it back? Is it okay? What's going on? Because it wasn't sanctioned by God. Eli knows how God operates. And he's like, this was not a war sanctioned by God. This was not allowed. God never said we could take the ark out and go into battle. This isn't the protocol. God has order, and this is not following God's command. Now, his sons are younger. We know he's frail and old, over 90 years old now. So we don't know if he was just overpowered by his sons or overwhelmed by the sheer number of people, the army plus other Levites, other priests coming in and just, and then just getting everything out. But clearly he knows it's not right. So he's sitting there, he's trembling. And when the man came in, the running man from Benjamin that came from the battle line, when he ran and came into the city and told the news, all the city cried out. The messenger projected the news, and everybody who was not in battle, who was still left in the city, heard it at Shiloh. And everyone is now crying, like, oh my gosh. Verse 14, when Eli heard the sound of the outcry, he said, what is this uproar? Because this man was running for about 22 miles. As soon as he gets to the edge of the city, probably starts crying out about it, yelling this, announcing this, scream crying. And so everybody else who hears it starts crying and uproar. So Eli's probably sitting a little bit further, closer to the temple, looking out. And so he hears this uproar. So he's like, what is this uproar? Then the man, that same messenger man, is still running through the city, calling. The man hurried and came and told Eli. Now, verse 15, now Eli was 98 years old, very old, and his eyes were set so that he could not see. Maybe cataracts, glaucoma, so he's essentially almost blind, so that he could not see. Verse 16, and the man said to Eli, I am the one who has come from the battle. I fled from the battle today. And Eli said, how did it go, my son? Verse 17, he who brought this news answered and said, Israel has fled before the Philistines, and there has also been a great defeat among the people. Your two sons also, Hophni and Phinehas, are dead. So he reports, this man from the Benjamin tribe runs 22 miles, runs over, declares it to the city, and now is declaring line by line a battle report to Eli. And he's saying, Israel has lost, the Philistines has won. The Philistines not only won, it was a great defeat. Your two sons have also died. And all of that is unfortunate. The last line, and the ark of God has been captured. Verse 18, as soon as he, the messenger, mentioned the ark of God, Eli fell over backward from his seat by the side of the gate, and his neck was broken, and he died, for the man was old and heavy. He had judged Israel 40 years. He was so struck by the news of the ark being captured that he fell backwards and he broke his neck and died. It also says he was heavy set, so obese. So we don't know if it's because he was eating all of that fat that was supposed to go to God, all the choice meats that were taken by force. But we do know he was heavy set. He had judged Israel for 40 years. He was the leader. He was the high priest for 4 decades, for 40 years for all of Israel. But we do see here, Eli hearing about the defeat. Okay. Hearing about his 2 sons dying. Okay. Hears about God's ark being captured. He's just like, Eli was not a perfect leader, was definitely not a good dad, but he was at least more concerned about the ark than he was about his own son. So there is some priority there. He does recognize there is some true understanding and belief and honoring to God, but just very poor execution and probably more giving into his fleshly temptations, the eating, the obesity. He's probably eating the meat that was taken unrightfully from the worshipers, allowing his sons to act that way. He dies. And so in one day, his 2 sons are dead, he himself dies, and the ark is taken. So this is terrible. This is literally horror. Eli was sitting on a chair the whole time, watching the street because he was trembling out of anxiety when they had forcibly taken the ark. Eli was probably opposed to it, but seemed passive and so did not stop it, or maybe could not because he's 98 years old. His sons could easily overpower him, or the military group that came back 22 miles to Shiloh to grab the ark could easily have just stand aside, old man, and just grabbed it, right? But he knew that they didn't go by protocol, so the ark was never supposed to leave. So they're supposed to ask for guidance. They skipped all the steps. So of course, when it becomes true that the ark truly was now captured, was now taken forcibly, he's like, oh my gosh, and probably understands that he is the religious leader. And you have now, on your watch, you lost the ark. It has never been lost to another country before, and you lost it. Verse 19, now his daughter-in-law, the wife of Phinehas, was pregnant, about to give birth. And when she heard the news that the ark of God was captured and that her father-in-law and her husband were dead, she bowed, another word for it is she crouched down, and gave birth, for her pains came upon her. So the whole country is in shock and horror, to the point that a pregnant woman, the shock pushed her into labor. Verse 20, and about the time of her death, the woman attending her said to her, do not be afraid, for you have borne a son. She's in pain, and then starts probably preterm labor, and then she's about to die from childbirth. And the midwives are saying, oh, don't worry, you have a son at least, because back then it's a blessing to have a son to carry on the family name. But she did not answer or pay attention. Verse 21, and she named the child Ichabod, saying, the glory has departed from Israel, because the ark of God had been captured, and because of her father-in-law and her husband who had just died. So the idea is no glory. Ichabod, no glory. Verse 22, and she said, the glory has departed from Israel, for the ark of God has been captured. So the child is born, then she dies pretty soon after. And it's just massive mourning and sorrow, and probably just massive tragic situations that are happening. So it is a sad situation, and we're left at a cliffhanger. So now we're like, okay, Ark of Covenant is now taken. The country is in disarray, in shock and horror.
Lost their high priest.
30,000 men in one day.
Oh my gosh.
And the Ark. All gone.